So, coming to this question then, on a different wavelength, the automation and artificial intelligence, right, which is affecting the developed world so much, should India worry about it now, at this point? I mean, for two reasons, right? One is that even though labor is cheap here, I don't think the substitution possibilities are so great that the Indian industry, when they start, they would in fact use very labor intensive processes. Secondly, the export market really gets difficult to capture when you have cheaper production going on through. We discussed some of this earlier, but so should we worry about this, and then what do we do about it?
See, well, worry for sure, because this is a fact. This is going to happen all over. What do you do about it with this worry? And sort of it links up with what I was saying earlier. It's going to change dramatically the workplace, because a lot of the jobs will be taken away by machines, but it will also make other kinds of work more productive. There'll be some complementary work, which is a smaller amount, which will be more productive, that you can join in over here. I feel actually this will force the world and India to do some major rethinking, a bit like Industrial Revolution forced us to rethink a whole lot of labor regulation and matters like that, which today it's very easy to underestimate, because those changes are so much a part of our life. But some people who are complete free marketeers will tell you that the Industrial Revolution was weathered so well and the world has done well after that, so why are we worried about this? What they forget is the Industrial Revolution caused a churning in human thinking, which was major. I mean, if you look at before the start of the 19th century, sort of 1760s, 70s, when technology is changing, since I used to have a lot of interest in child labor, I used to follow this literature, absolutely routine statements would come from the rich saying that children working 12 hours a day is good for building character. And this was treated as sort of normal talk. Then it gets challenged by the Factories Acts coming in, and then putting restrictions on child labor, putting number of hours of labor being restricted. So there was, and it's actually very, very large, the interventions that took place and the churning in thought. I feel we are at a stage of the world where there has to be a churn in terms of thinking of how do you regulate so that this doesn't become a disadvantage. And one more point I want to tell you is the main problem is not the automation. If machines come and take away all our drudge work, that in some sense it's something to celebrate. But what is happening is a machine is not just coming away and taking your work, but converting what is wages to what is profit and rent earned by the owners of the machine.
Right.
It's this transfer which is really the tragedy of the machines coming in.
Right.
So we have to think in terms of regulation that don't allow workers' income to become profit and rent in the pockets of people who own these machines. So the machines arriving, taking over drudge work is to be celebrated, but you need interventions for redistribution of income, very dramatic compared to what we've seen thus far, which the technology is forcing us to do.
I don't know what kind of regulations, except you would have to basically share the ownership of capital.
So what you have to do, and even sort of mainstream newspaper like New York Times last week came out with an op-ed where this is being argued strongly, and I actually believe in that. What Marty Weitzman and others in our profession had argued a long time ago. Some fraction of profit in society has to be shared across the population. If your company makes a huge profit, you're riding on the shoulders of huge amounts of work that has taken place. So there's no moral right to everything. So if you take away 25% of a nation's shares, give it across to the population, you will actually celebrate every time a machine comes in, instead of that being a labor versus labor problem, the way it's made out to be in the US now. Every time work comes to India, it is Indian workers taking away that. What they forget is profits going up in the US. If there's profit sharing, that's going to be standard. I feel actually either we will get to that kind of a regulatory change, or this industrial revolution, this one going on now, will be devastating for the world, unlike the industrial revolution. If it does reduce the incentive for the firms to acquire machines, because with that part of the profit will go to the workers, then that's fine. It just slows down the automation process a little bit, because a part of the benefit of automation is not that you're sucking the entire profit into your pocket, part of it you have to give. If that slows it down, to me, that is a very natural process, and we live with that. But my worry would be, what is happening right now is that every time a machine comes in, it's being taken away entirely as profits. And you know, the other thing that people very often say is, why not slow down the march of technology? Technology is not being done by any single person. It's not a decision of a president or a prime minister. It's thousands of people, little innovations, which is bringing in technology. It's almost like gravity. I mean, you can have a distaste for gravity, but there's no point debating whether we should have it or not. Technology is a bit like that. I mean, it's coming, it will continue to come, but those little incentives you can change. It may slow down a little bit through a profit sharing, in which case it's fine.
I was going to take us to the basic income issue, which is the way that Kaushik had put it is the way that it's coming from California, for example, which is that since we're going to have robotics and we're going to have other artificial intelligence, people are not going to work, or there won't be enough work, and therefore there has to be a basic income which everybody can get something. So that's coming from California. I think if you look at it from from us, first of all, I think for us the threat of robotics is not there now. I would agree with you, maybe 15 or 20 years down the road, but it's coming so strongly from almost all of the northern countries that we talk a lot about. We've been having automation of all types, technology coming in and taking away jobs for years and years and years. I've seen textile industry go from one textile industry producing the same amount of cloth with hardly, I think, 1/20th of the labor. So it's been happening, it will continue to happen. But coming back to the basic income issue, we have been approaching it in a different way, which is that the government has been trying. There is a social compact that the poorest or the poor should be helped by this scheme, this scheme, this scheme. And as I've said often, that we have 320 schemes in one village, even today. And in fact, instead of decreasing, those schemes are increasing. So, and what we have found is that money in the hands, an income in the hands of the poor is translated not only into better consumption, but better production. And going back to my first point, that when they don't have money to buy machines or don't have money to invest in machines or even hire machines, once you bring the income to a certain level, that whole dynamic changes. So I think this idea of a basic income, and I don't think in India we're ready for a universal basic income, but certainly you in your table, you don't have it up, but in your table you talked about the poverty levels. Now those are the official poverty levels, but if you just double that, you still have people who would be earning, a family would be earning what, 12,000 a month, 10,000 a month, and that's double, and that's 60% of people. So we really should be looking not at the bottom 20% or 30%, but at the bottom 60%. And an extra income in the hands of those people will really create a different dynamic, I think.
No, I agree.
Yeah, but Ashok, let me also say one thing, that as far as the automation and robotics is concerned, I think the danger is very real today, but it's a danger which actually confronts the higher skilled, the more educated of our workforce, the ones who are today sitting pretty. They are the ones who should now start worrying like hell. I agree with Kaushik, it's not going to be semi-skilled, unskilled. I don't think robotics is doing anything there in the near future. But today, if you look at industry after industry, automobile components are a classic example. Robotics have already come in. People are getting laid off. So what's going to end up happening, again I go back, that informal component of your organized sector, that's under threat again from robotics. And one has to be careful because that's the aspirational part for a lot of our population.
We are seeing a real transformation in education. We are now seeing from almost a majority illiterate population, we now have a majority not only literate, but secondary school or at least primary school. Their aspirations are very different. Yeah. And what you're seeing, these agitations for job reservation, these are all the aspirational people who are looking for something better than breast transplanting by hand.
Yeah.
So, it's a big danger.